Couch, I'm joined by Ntsiki Mkhize. Ntsiki is a self-published author and founder of MentHer, a global mentorship network supporting female social entrepreneurs that aims to inspire, connect, and empower. Her inaugural book, My Hall of Mentors, was released in 2019, and she had book launches in both South Africa and Scotland. She's a professional speaker and facilitator. Not only has she delivered a TEDx talk, but she has also spoken at the International Speaker Summit and Epic Entrepreneurs Virtual Conference, which took place in 2020. Ntsiki is a non-executive director for Pamanda Properties and Ikasi Entrepreneurs and has a master's in social innovation from Glasgow Caledonian University. Ntsiki, thank you so much for joining me. It is such a privilege to have you on the Blue Couch.
Thank you so much, Odile. It's such a pleasure to be here and to connect with you after our time at varsity together.
Yes, thank you so much for taking time to also share your experience. I'm sure it'll be very insightful, to people who are looking to know what social entrepreneurship is about and sort of going into the same space. So Ntsiki, you have a diverse range of interests. You are a speaker, a mentor, you've done pageantry, and you are a philanthropist. But I do want to start with your entrepreneurship role. How did you get into social entrepreneurship?
So I think I've always been interested in entrepreneurship. So that was always definitely something that's on my path. So when I was doing my undergrad, actually, I started a business with a friend of mine at university. Called Cream, and we launched a comic book, and it was all focused around how do you get students interested in business. And then the process of doing that, we were talking to different people, just seeing where we could get help, how we could get distribution and so forth. And I stumbled across I think at the time it was called the Center for Social Economy and Social Entrepreneurship or something like that. And now it's just the Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Johannesburg. And I went and I spoke to the director there, who happens to now be one of my mentors as well. And just, told her what we were doing, and that began a relationship. And that kind of steered me in the direction of social entrepreneurship, because that's where I first kind of learned about the concept. I learned about the principles of social entrepreneurship, how it works. And I also just met a couple of nonprofits and social enterprises that were changing the space, and that's kind of where my journey with social entrepreneurship started.
Nice. So yeah, that's quite a long journey, but also meeting people along your way to steer you on the right path. So what does a typical day look for you as a social entrepreneur?
So every day is different. I think that's for most entrepreneurs, that you kind of have days where you've got your admin set up, and then you've got days where you're interacting with clients or customers or beneficiaries or whatever it may be. And then you have days when you're just speaking to investors, and then you have days when you're just focused on social media. So I kind of try to find a rhythm for each week. So I kind of try to set out my Mondays for just strategy and planning for the week, and then the other 3 days in the week for meetings and things like that, and then Friday another admin day to wrap up stuff that's happened in the week, and then just finding a rhythm of what works for you.
Sure. So it sounds like that requires a lot of discipline. So what do you use? I have to ask now, what do you use for your planning? What planning tools do you use? I'm like a planning tool nerd.
So actually, I developed a purpose planner a few years ago, because at the time I hadn't found anything that does everything I wanted it to do. So I have this whole thing that I do when I'm thinking about my strategy for the year. I'll sit down and I'll set my goals out according to this lifetime model that I use. And then from all my goals, I'll look at my top 3, top 5 goals. And then for each of those goals, I'll set up action steps to say, okay, what's the one thing I need to do every day to make sure that this particular goal is met? And that also is in this Excel digital interactive planner that I have. And that's kind of what I use. And then I always have a notebook handy. Mine's dirty now because white wasn't the best color. But I always have this notebook, and then in it I'll write down tactical stuff. Today, this is a to-do list for the day, and I'll just tick things off as I go. And then obviously my Google calendar, that's very helpful for just slotting in meetings, including meetings with myself. So I will actually block out time and say, between this hour and this hour, I'm not available because I'm doing X, and I put those stuff down, because I find that when you put it in your diary, you honor it, versus if it's in the back of your mind, you're oh yeah, I need to get to that at some point today. You don't really find the time to get to it. And it also helps, I think, now with the pandemic, because we're working from home, I can actually say to my family, like, I'm not, yes, I'm here, but I'm not available because from this time to this time, I'm working on stuff. And that kind of just allows me to have a good rhythm. And then just for working with additional people, so a lot of the team that I have is external, so in the business, it's just me. But with our magazine, for example, we have an external production crew that helps with putting together the magazine. And so we have a system that we use together just to track the project. And then with all the mentees in our membership community, we've signed up about 100 ladies at the moment. So I'm exploring shifting from like manually doing stuff to using like MailChimp or Kajabi. So I'm still exploring that and seeing how it can best work out.
Sure. Okay, so now I'm wondering, because I know like as an academic this happens, you sort of set your plans for the year, and then maybe an opportunity comes up and you're like, oh my goodness, this is a once in a lifetime, or I can't. So how do you reconcile, things that may come up during the year that you're like, if I don't take this, it might not come again, and sort of sticking to those goals that you set for yourself?
I think it's good to be open to stuff. You just need to ask yourself the question, does this help me achieve my objectives, right? Because you can't plan for everything. You can plan for what you can do, but opportunities that could take you 10 steps forward can always present themselves, and you don't know when that's going to happen. So when things do come up, it's just going, does this help me to achieve my objective? And to always be open to the conversation, so even if something is a great opportunity, but you can't take it up at the moment, it's to have a conversation and go, how would this look? How could we work together? What would be, the end game? And then maybe going to, let's pick this up at a different time, So I don't think it's a yes or no thing. It's more like exploring, which is necessary when you're an entrepreneur, because you never know where your next contract, your next partnership can come from.
Yeah, I suppose it's a good thing to have an overall value proposition. So you have like a guiding light, I suppose. So I want to move on to just speaking about mentors and mentees, which you're like an expert in. So sometimes we ask the wrong people the right questions. How do we sort of discern? I think sometimes we get into the trap of thinking, oh, this person has years of experience or years of life experience, and then we ask them something that maybe we shouldn't be, because they don't have expertise in that sort of thing. How do you sort of discern when it comes to mentors and mentees, and maybe also mentors who you think know, but maybe they don't? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. So I think a really good way to how I work with the process and how I work with my mentees and helping them find other mentors is going, what are your goals and what specific areas in your life are you looking to develop? So is it financial? Is it academic? Is it in your career? Like what specifically are you looking at? And then identifying people who emulate the same kind of success that you're looking for. So if you're saying as an academic, you want to publish your research within a certain period of time, but you also want to publish an article in a certain journal, then you need to go and find somebody who's done those particular things, right? And just by having that kind of alignment, that's an indication of, okay, that person has the experience or knows a little bit of something about what you need to be asking them. And that can really help you to kind of put the right stuff to the right person. And then sometimes I think also just being, I call them gentle statements. So it's giving somebody the opportunity to say something else instead of just going yes or no. So don't ask yes or no questions, or don't ask specific questions. So it's always good to say, hey, I was wondering if you know anything about this, or if you know somebody that's an expert at this that could help me. And that allows the person to go, if they're not an expert, they don't feel the pressure of like, I have to make something up now. They can actually just say to you, oh, actually, you know what, I'll think about it, or I know so-and-so, I'll try to connect you to that particular individual. And I think that's just a really gentle way of communicating with people that leads to better outcomes.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So just then moving on to your master's. So I know that a lot of people say that entrepreneurship is a trial and error game, and it sounds like you've done some of that. And I often wonder about the usefulness of like furthering your education like formally. So why did you do your master's?
So I did my master's. Specifically, I chose to go do my master's in Scotland, in Glasgow, because they do, as a country, have a really good social entrepreneurship ecosystem, and they even have policies around social entrepreneurship and how they support social enterprises. And you can formally register as a social enterprise. Whereas in South Africa, you're either a non-profit or a for-profit business or a cooperative. So the environment, I think, was really good. And then the specific university. At the time that I was researching and wanting to apply there, Muhammad Yunus was the vice chancellor, and he is a Nobel Peace Prize winner for the work that he's done with the Grameen Bank and the Grameen Foundation in India. And I was like, I want to go and meet that man, you know. Yeah. And specifically, I think from a university perspective, that university has done a lot of research when it comes to social entrepreneurship. You know, so when you look at things from an academic approach perspective, it's kind of like, what is the validation behind this? What is the research? What are some of the studies that have been done? And I wanted to be in a space where I could have access to that academic knowledge and information. I think also very helpful from a backbone perspective, where if you're working in a space where something isn't really a norm or a set up discipline or something that people recognize, it's really good to kind of go back to the literature, you know, which is not the most entrepreneurship thing. But I think from a South African context, it's like you're going into a space that doesn't really exist or isn't formalized or isn't recognized, and kind of going, okay, who is doing this? How are they doing it? What can I learn from them? And then how can I adapt that to my context? And the nice thing about being in Glasgow was that there was that combination between academic and practical social enterprises who were out on the ground doing things. It was a really nice learning space to be able to combine the two and go, okay, cool. Literature is limited when it comes to this because these things are not practical. Like no one actually does this when they're running a business. And then see the people running businesses and going, okay, cool, this is actually what things look like on the ground, and finding good interplay between the two.
So did you find what you were looking for?
I did. Unfortunately, Muhammad Yunus was no longer the vice chancellor the year that I got there. It took me 2 years to fundraise. So his last tenure was just the year before I arrived. And so the year that I got there was a new incoming VC. But I think from a course perspective, 100%, I learned a lot, and I even learned things that I wasn't looking into. You know, so the stuff that's like, it's there, it's important, but you don't really know that it affects you. So we had a course on human rights, gender equality, and climate change. And for me, those are all important things that happen. I just hadn't, from a business aspect, considered those in social entrepreneurship. We had a course on microfinance that was really helpful, and we had a course on alternative economic models, which are three key things that I think interplay so well with the South African and African ecosystem, that are things that you constantly have to consider these. It presents new opportunities, it gives you challenges to think about. It also helps you understand like certain interface between where government and corporate kind of draw a line, which then emphasizes the need for social enterprises to come in and make a difference. So that was really helpful, and then our research was exciting. So that, I think I got what I wanted from that as well. And then I think, you know, one of the other things is, as somebody who is a professional speaker and wanting to kind of formalize or add value to social entrepreneurship in South Africa, was that aspect of what validates you or what makes you a valid source or a recommended source. So I think having a master's helps in that regard. I haven't gotten to a place where somebody's gone, hey, do you have a master's in this? So I don't really know if it counts for anything. But I think it's just that aspect when you do walk into a room, particularly as a young Black female, that I think just like sometimes your CV like helps people go like, oh, she's competent, without you having to do too much.
She knows what she's talking about.
Well, just maybe, like maybe she has a master's in this.
Yeah, I hear you there. I'm on the same page with you. So have you like implemented any of those in your business, or is it more like high level engagements that you had?
No, I have. So yeah, no, so the nice thing was that my research was kind of inspired by MentHer. So the business that I set up is a global mentorship network that's focused on supporting female social entrepreneurs who are specifically at idea pre-seed stage in their business, and connecting them to mentors. and then looking at how can we connect them to funding opportunities, to markets, and to networks. And we haven't gotten to that aspect yet, so that's the stuff we're wanting to build out this year. But the research was really helpful from a perspective of understanding what some of the blockages exist, understanding what other ecosystem players are doing, and just kind of mapping out the ecosystem for myself. So even though I haven't implemented or worked towards everything that I did in my research, I've got that ecosystem map to kind of guide my journey that I may have not researched with the same level of detail if I was just kind of going, hey, I want to start a business, let's see how it goes.
So then just moving on to the funding which you touched on. So you said you fundraised for 2 years, oh my word. How did you do that? Where did you get money?
Everywhere. So the university had a scholarship that was an academic scholarship, so that covered part of tuition. And then and there's a bunch of scholarships out there, so you can do research. There's a platform called African Leadership something that normally has scholarship opportunities up. And then I created a GoFundMe page, and I was like, hi guys, I'm trying to go do my master's, please help me. And people donated, and so a lot of the funds that I got were actually just a combination of different people who donated over 2 years. So as little as like 200 grand some people gave. I had somebody sponsor plane tickets. They're like, oh yeah, I've got like frequent flyer miles, and so like I'll sponsor you, so things like that just like came together. And then I also had time to just set up some savings. So because I was living at home, I was able to save a little bit of cash, and then I just paid off like my car and my credit card, and I was like, okay, bye mom and dad, like I'll see you when I come back. Yeah. But that was helpful. So just knowing that I didn't have to worry about that stuff when I was gone, and then the little bit of cash that I saved up I was then able to contribute to that. But then also when I got to the UK, I got a job, so I ended up also working at a restaurant on weekends.
Nice. And what was that experience like? Would you recommend that people go study overseas, or would they not have been a difference?
No, 100% definitely go study overseas. And I would even say I don't really think it matters where you study overseas as long as there's a good international community. So I think it was really great because like my flightmates, for example, was 2 ladies from the UK, 1 lady from Ireland, 2 ladies from the Dominican Republic. I made friends from Kenya, from Germany, from Italy. Like one of my classmates and friends that I've made from Italy was recently here. So we met up in Cape Town, and she was like, you should come to Italy. And I'm like, of course I'm going to come to Italy, So that was really nice. I made friends with people from the Netherlands. So I think it's really great to be in a different context because it allows you to get a different perspective in a different worldview compared to what you're normally or traditionally are exposed to. And I think it's also really helpful from an academic perspective to learn things from a different context. So you know what your opinion is or what your perspective is from a South African angle, but how much you formulate your opinions if you're in a different context. And I found that was really helpful, because I think in South Africa, we're quite open, or like poverty is not a new thing for us, so we work around that, we're honest about it, we address it. What I thought was really interesting was that in the UK, people find poverty to be like embarrassing, and they don't talk about it as poverty, they talk about it as austerity measures that led to whatever. And I just thought it was so interesting, but because of how they spoke about it, that informed the way that they implemented certain policies to address it. And I thought that was an interesting perspective to have. But then also just the lived experience, so going to a new space and learning how we're actually not different, and then going to a new space and learning the different ways that we are very different, that can make you feel motivated or give you a fresh perspective. As I remember one of the days at my student block where I was staying, that there was a power cut. And me and the girls from the Dominican Republic were like, oh yeah, power cuts. It happens all the time in our countries,
We know what.
And the girls from the UK, what is going on? How dare there be a power cut? And we're like, guys, chill, the power will come back. Like, it's not an issue. And I think it was gone for like an hour or like 2 hours. And we're like, oh, that's great. Like, it's back. But I was just like, I love how they have this expectation of service delivery that's like, how dare you cut our power? Like, you can't do that. And I think that's just for me as an individual, from a civil society perspective, was like, this is the kind of energy we need to have as young people who are in our own spaces, driving change, making a difference, and having an influence. And this is the kind of standard that we need to have. And yeah, it's also great just to have friends that you can go visit in different parts of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I want to ask you about, like being a young person and having done all the stuff you've done. So as young people, we have so much pressure, to be like early achievers. And you can see it in the age awards, which is what I call it, so top 100 young this and top 50 young that and 30 and the 30 and then it's 40 and the 40. And based on my interactions with you, you seem very measured about how you do things. You take your time and you really think through everything you want to do, and yet you've achieved so much in such a short space of time. So I want to ask you, how do you balance the pressure of this achieving while you're young with, properly implementing things and making sure, you sort of follow through in what you do?
Yeah, thanks for that, Odile. So I think what's very important is that you need to decide or know what your own operating level is, right? And what I mean by that is you all go to school and do exams, and you know the kids that study really hard and get a 60, and then you know you didn't really study that hard and you still got an 80. So you need to know and be honest about your own performance level, right? And when you know your own performance level, it's then important for you, especially once you're outside of high school or varsity, where you can kind of peg yourself and go like, oh, this is a top 10 or whatever, that you know, okay, I'm actually showing up in life and giving 100% of myself, or I'm showing up in life and giving 60% of myself. And you need to know the kinds of results that will get you. And that's very important, that you don't measure that against anybody else, because you can look at somebody who gives 60% effort and gets really high results and think that you guys are playing in the same wavelength, and you're not. So for example, if you are somebody who can only focus on one thing at a time, that's how you need to judge yourself. And you can't look at the person who seems to multitask really well and want the same kind of success. So I think knowing how you perform and how you show up is very important. And then secondly, to be honest about your journey, right? So if you study medicine or law, it's going to take you a lot longer to qualify than your friends. So when all your other friends are graduating with their honors or their masters, you can't be like, oh, I'm not going anywhere in life. Like, yes, you're going to study for 7 years. Once you finish your studies for 7 years, the next thing will kick in. And the same goes for if you chose to do all your studies, your master's and your PhD. So by 30, everyone has a job and is doing whatever, but you're still studying. You need to be measured in that. You need to know, okay, this is a journey that I chose, the path that I'm on. Therefore, I won't have the same things as other people because we're taking very different paths. And for me, that's been very true about entrepreneurship, that when you go, I'm going to leave formal employment and try to do something by myself, you need to be honest about the fact that you're not always going to have money. You're not going to have the same income level as what you would if you were employed, or if you're employed in the same industry as your friends are. And you kind of just need to temper your expectations and have a really good plan in place and go like, okay, what success looks like for me is to have my expenses and savings for a year. So for the next year, I know I'm financially sorted and I can focus on my business without being stressed out. Or I'm able to just cover my expenses, or I need to move back home, whatever it is, right? And be honest about those things for yourself. And that's really what I've done. So I specifically chose to live at home when everyone else was moving out. And I was like, I actually can't afford rent anyway, because like I'm starting a business. So it's just not practical for me. And it allowed me to save a lot. And then when I did want to move out, I was like, actually, I'm going to go study overseas. So it doesn't make sense to move out. And then when I was ready to move out, the pandemic happened. So now I'm still at home, But just being honest with yourself about those kinds of things and not pitching yourself against other people, because our industries are different. The pay rate for this kind of skills, value, and knowledge is very different. So you need to be able to take that against yourself and the things that you want to accomplish for yourself. And then I think also having realistic timelines. So if you start a business, be honest about the fact that it might not give you the kind of turnover that you expect within the first year, especially if you are doing the work and putting in the time. So if you go, my business is actually going to need a lot more time to give me the kind of revenue that I want, that's okay. Don't feel like, oh, I'm failing because my business isn't doing what I wanted to do. And I think that's very important, because when you are in a place where you feel like you want to change your life, or you want to move on because people are now buying houses or upgrading to their second car, and you're not able to. You need to have that perspective and go, but I chose this path and I chose to be an entrepreneur. And that just means that my finances are set up differently. And sometimes that is what you can afford to do for yourself. And sometimes it's because you're paying salaries, right? So you might be making enough money to do all these lovely things, but you're also responsible for other people's salaries. So once you've paid salaries, you actually can't afford to do stuff. So just being honest about that and being clear about your own expectations. Obviously, that's very different if you are in a services business, or like if you're a consultant, for example, because that's your time. So what I make as a professional speaker and facilitator is very different to what I make in running a service-based business that's structured around membership and support and having a magazine. Those are two very, very different things. So it's having those clear perspectives of what is possible and then adjusting your expectations around that.
Sure, my goodness. So being confident about where you're going and adjusting your expectations, my goodness. Yeah.
You have to be, because it really does get difficult. And on those days when you're feeling very discouraged, like you just need to have that perspective about you so that you don't lose sight of the end goal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ntsiki, you have so much wisdom in that head of yours.
And also, I want to add to that. Oh, sorry, I just thought about this as well. Is to also not worry about gimmicks, right? And I know there are accolades, but they are also gimmicks, because I am one of those people. When I see those lists of like the top 100, the top 50, the top this, I go and I Google people, and I'm like, oh, what does this person do? You know? And I don't know if it's academic in me or if it's like the entrepreneur in me, but sometimes I go, there's not really anything here. Like this person just like is really good at looking good, or like they just had like 50,000 followers, but there actually is no business behind this, you know. So you might be doing something really great that is noteworthy, that is honorable, but no one's gonna notice it because you don't have more than 1,000 followers on Instagram. But that doesn't mean what you're doing is not valuable. So as nice as it might be to make the list, I definitely would not use those as a benchmark for your own personal success. And I'll even take this to the extent of a lecturer that I heard once, who is in one of those universities that people often get Nobel Prizes or get nominated for Nobel Prizes. And I remember him being like, why would you even want to do that? Like, it's not even like the entire academic community that thinks it's great, you know? I just thought it was so interesting coming from somebody who's inside the space, you know, because for you on the outside, you're like, wow, this person got a Nobel Prize. And him being inside and having been exposed to, I suppose, that world of people who do that research, people who get nominated, the social and economic stuff behind the scenes, he was like, no, it's not really. I mean, I suppose the award itself is great, but he was like, the allure around it isn't everything that it's cut out for. So just focus on doing your research and accomplishing what it is that you want to do. So don't use those external things as measures for whether you're successful or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to agree with that. I remember seeing someone who got nominated for one of these things once, and I knew the person, and I read the bio, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is this guy's job description. He got he got nominated for doing his job. You know, he's not doing like anything like beyond the picture. So I also think it's about like the pool of applicants at a particular point in time, right? So if you know the Ntsikis of the world are there, you know. You're gonna have to perform here. But if it's just, you know, a bunch of average Joes, then, you know, if you're also an average Joe, you might then get in. But yeah, it's tricky. So yeah, I think maybe you're right about there being a gimmicky feel to it. But yeah. Ntsiki, it's been such a privilege chatting to you. I wish you all the best going forward with your business and with MentHer and with the magazine. I'll add a link in bio, as they say, not bio, video description to the MentHer.
Perfect, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So our publication is free. So anybody who wants to download a free copy of our magazine, just head to our website, menther.co.za. And then also we're open at the moment to take new members into our Social Impact Founders Club, which is our membership community. So if you are a woman and you want to start your own business that has impact, or if you run a nonprofit and you want to pivot and create some kind of financial aspect or revenue model that can help you be more sustainable. We welcome you to join our community. So you can also go to our website and find more information on that, or you can send an email to membership@menther.co.za. But it's been such a pleasure chatting to you, Odile. And I hope that everyone who listens to this kind of goes like, oh, that was helpful. Yeah, and I wish you guys all the best on your study journey, academic journey, and in your careers.